So I assume that now we start officially, so to say. And dear colleagues and friends all around the world, cordial greetings from New York. I do not know what time is there, but I guess that good evening and good morning and good afternoon. My name is Sergei Zelenev. I'm the special representative of International Council on Social Welfare to the United Nations. Welcome to the virtual side event on social inclusion through digital inclusion, which is convened in the margins of the Commission for Social Development. Selecting its priority theme linked to the impact of digital technologies on social development well-being and the quest for digital solutions, Commission linked it to social inclusion, one of the priority themes of the World Social Summit. And this is the topic of our today's discussion. This side event is co-organized by the International Council on Social Welfare and our traditional partner, International Association of the Schools of Social Work. We are also happy to greet other co-sponsors, the University of Distance Learning in Spain, UNED, who provided the digital platform and technical support. The event is also co-sponsored by the Korean Council on Social Welfare, who provided the financial support. So I am asked to do an introduction and moderate the discussion. We are now at different parts of the world, but we are digitally connected, and this connectivity helps us to discuss the social impact of digitalization. And even facing the pandemic constraints, we can move forward to find some innovative solutions with the help of digital technologies. Of course, it is not impossible to mention that pandemics, which is the worldwide technology, really disrupted life in many communities. It entailed enormous loss of life and derailed normal functioning of societies. It dealt blows to employment and income almost everywhere. I must say that because we are living through these difficult times. Few governments were ready to address these challenges effectively, and people in vulnerable situations quite often were hit hardest. The crisis exposed the structural weaknesses in society. I am hesitant to speak about the silver lining when such major disaster is discussed. But I would say that the development of safe and effective COVID vaccine in quite a record time could be called a remarkable testament to modern scientific capabilities. Also, the crisis forced many countries to accelerate the use of digital technologies, for example, in distance learning and service provision. But the COVID landscape has been changing. Now we're seeing that there are major efforts at the national level to vaccinate people. And only a while ago, it was a rush to create the vaccines. Access to vaccine became a clear priority, and it brings new trade-offs because we would like to avoid new exclusion, people who would be unable to access the vaccines. And of course, delays in the management of vaccine distribution could bring new problems and increase exclusion, while the renewed infections and recent mutations could even delay recovery. I think that we could safely say that international and regional cooperation are essential in a world facing this uneven recovery. And when vaccines have haves and vaccines have nots. We do not want new form of social exclusion, and it should be taken into consideration when we are discussing our issues of enhancing transparency around the vaccine. The current trends leave no doubt that digitalization could be a very useful tool for achieving several SDGs, including the reduction of poverty and fostering social inclusion. Its impact on the world of work is a special issue. But there are some big ifs for the possibility of success. If the policy mix aimed at digital governance is correct, if funding is available, and if institutional changes in society go hand in hand with these efforts. Most important are people, their capabilities and their attitudes. They are key, while policies should be tailored to specific national context. The physical availability of computers and the internet, of course, are very important. But they should be matched with people's ability to make use of those technologies, to engage in meaningful social practices. Of course, we all are aware that digital technologies are around all of us, and digital skills are now required to do numerous tasks essential for the day-to-day living. But as social scientists, we cannot ignore the negative impacts of digital divide, evident within countries and between countries, in terms of affordability and access. So the fact speaks for themselves. Internet is used by a little more than half of the world population, like about 54%, according to my figures, but another half is not using it and missing obvious benefits of access. So basically 3.6 billion people do not have access to internet. And this gap is a new barrier and a new factor of social exclusion. Talking about digital technology, we are seeing that its obvious impact in many spheres, in health, in financial services, in education, of course. But we are also seeing enormous potential of digital technology in terms of opportunities and benefits offered by these technologies. And this is a point which I would like to underscore. These opportunities are not emerging spontaneously. They require a concerted action of the state, of the private sector, and civil society. And these are the key stakeholders and partners. So I'm looking forward to the presentations of the panelists to highlight the digital technology, how it could improve and foster social inclusion, what are the ways and means to empower marginalized groups. And thank you for listening for my brief introduction. Now let me give the floor to Dr. Sang-Moy Soo, the Global President of ICSW. Dr. Soo is also the President of the Korea National Council on Social Welfare, a representative body of the private social welfare sector in Korea. President Soo occupied high positions in his country. He was a member of the parliament, he was a minister, and he has absolutely distinguished career in his country. You are welcome, President Soo.
Okay, thank you, Sergey, for a very kind introduction. I feel very honored to make a presentation at this virtual side event organized by the UN Commission for Social Development on the important subject of social inclusion through digital inclusion. My presentation today will focus on the status of e-welfare in Korea, with a special emphasis on challenges and opportunities toward the inclusion, social inclusion. The recent experience of COVID-19 has reminded us of the important role of ICT in all fields, including the social welfare sector, due to the social distancing measures. E-welfare can be defined as the environment or status where social welfare information and the services are delivered and exchanged through ICT, and the resultant behavioral changes in the field of social welfare. There are several reasons why we need e-welfare. First of all, the use of ICT can result in social welfare that is both higher in quality, safer, and more responsive to citizens' needs. Second, information technology can also play a supporting role in creating awareness of existing activities that enable social participation. Particularly, the application of ICT in care services can create more age-friendly environment and make older people's life more comfortable. Examples are offering customized care for the elderly using AI robots, application of ICT for disabled people for promoting social participation, and the development of wearable technologies to support caregivers' work as well as ADL of people who need assistance. Third, the use of ICT can promote innovation in the welfare delivery system by minimizing welfare blind spots, as well as establishing a more efficient welfare management system utilizing big data and AI. Now I'd like to cite some examples of the actual ICT applications in the Korean welfare sector. The first example is AI technology-based care robot, such as Hyodo for the elderly living alone, and Mibom for patients with mild dementia. These robots play the role of reminding users to take medications and meals, protecting users from leaving their environments in an unsafe way, monitoring users' activities in real time, and sending messages to their family members or caregivers in case of emergency. The second example is Koyohan Taxi, which is a taxi driven by a hearing impaired driver. Customers who use Koyohan Taxi can communicate with the taxi driver through a specially designed device, thus encouraging their social participation and creating jobs for them. The third example is a Silver Friend, which is an AI speaker for the elderly living alone. Silver Friend provides useful information for daily life, such as fortune telling, weather forecast, and news. It also provides customized care services related to health and safety. ICT can create innovation in welfare delivery system. In 2010, the Korean government established Korea Social Security Information Service, which is an institution of information platform that aims to realize customized welfare policies. The Social Security Information System, called Hanbok-eum, aims to achieve both budget saving and reduction of blind spots in social welfare programs. For example, the budget saving amounted something like 3.7 trillion won during the period of 2010-2016. The Korea Social Security Information Service collects all the data from various public agencies, such as social insurance corporations and utility companies, and utilize them to check the eligibility of beneficiaries, as well as to find out the blind spots in various social welfare programs. From the Korean experience in utilizing ICT in social welfare sector, we can draw the following policy implications. First, the technical ability of service providers and welfare beneficiaries needs to be improved through various training programs to be funded by the government. Second, there is urgent need for building governance structures for the wide application of ITC in both public and private sectors and close partnership between them. The Korean National Council on Social Welfare can play this role. On the global level, this function can also be performed by the International Council on Social Welfare, particularly in the area of ITC training for service providers and welfare beneficiaries. The third, the recent experience of COVID-19 has increased the need for promoting multidisciplinary cooperation among social welfare, health, and technology sectors. In the Korean context, the Ministry of Health and Welfare can perform this role under the umbrella of a so-called New Deal, which is an ambitious investment program for the COVID-19 era by the Moon Jae-in government. The fourth, there is also need for pursuing deregulation policy measures as well as privacy protection measures. This is a very delicate policy option because these two policy goals are often contradictory in reality. For example, the remote medical examination is strongly opposed by the Korea Association of Medical Doctors. And the application of big data in the health sector is often hampered by the public concern for protecting the patient's privacy. There is no doubt that the social welfare sector has suffered a great deal during the period of COVID-19 due to the various social distancing measures. During the period of COVID-19, it was very difficult to operate senior nursing homes as well as care hospitals because of serious concern for the spread of the epidemic. And many community welfare centers has to be closed down due to the various social distancing measures. However, we can turn this unfortunate event into a new opportunity if we can upgrade the quality of welfare services through the active use of ICT. In this process, our National Council can play a pivotal role in their respective countries, and the ICSW can also perform the role of advocator as well as a coordinator in the global context. In conclusion, I think this side event we are having now can initiate the movement toward the e-welfare and follow two-day conference on this subject to be organized jointly by ICSW and the KNCSW in May this year, and it will be organized by Antonio, can play a pivotal role in this respect. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Su, for your statement. And thank you for making this sacrifice, because we all know that it's a deep night in Korea. Thank you. Now,
it's only midnight.
Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Hector Cebola Boado. He is the Director General of Innovation and Social Strategy of the Madrid City Council. We are very pleased to have him with us today. He is a sociologist and also is a professor at UNED. His research seeks to understand how the migrant status determines educational and health outcomes among children of migrants and migrant children. You have a floor, sir.
Okay, let me first share my screen to make sure that I can show the presentation that we prepared for this opportunity. So let me first of all start by thanking everyone for having us here and for giving us the opportunity of sharing with you some of the most pressing issues that we are facing in Madrid at the time of digitalizing our social services. So my aim in this presentation is really to give an overview of the most important challenges, some of which have been actually mentioned by President Xu regarding the need to actually improve the technical abilities of service providers and also of our welfare beneficiaries. So Madrid's commitment to digitalization or to the digitalization of public service is already long-standing. I would say that over the last 10 years, fields such as mobility, economy and entrepreneurship, urban planning have been leading this race towards digitalization. In these sectors, the logic of artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotization has allowed to actually improve the profiling of local service users, improving, of course, the citizen experience when contacting public administrations, but has also allowed to spread out the use of data analytics, allowing for better planning and evaluation of our own public policies, making public spending more efficient. Unfortunately, social services have been lagging behind this race towards digitalization, but there is now in this mandate a strong political commitment to compensate for this delay. We want social services, our local social services, to join the broader city plan for digitalization, and we want to catch up with other fields of public policy at the local level that have already managed to digitalize increasingly. The very creation of a social DG for social innovation is just one of these proofs. Happily, and I agree with President Xu in some of the statements he made during his presentation, probably 2021 is a good timing to do so. There are two main reasons why it is a good timing for us to catch up with other fields of public policy in terms of digitalization from the social service perspective. The first of them is that the European funds that have been released for tackling the consequences of the pandemic allow for very explicitly actually to spend resources and money to be prepared for challenges dealing with green and, most importantly to us, digital transitions. But also because, in our views, COVID-19 has accelerated some interesting secular trends that can actually favor the digitalization of social services in Madrid. Let me give you a few examples. So according to our estimations, 28.5% of the households of the beneficiaries seeking to receive support from the local social services in Madrid in 2020 during the confinement and the pandemics were not previously registered. So these are like new social service users. And it is thanks to dealing with our data, our own data, survey and register data, that we know that most of them are more educated, are younger, and are very well represented among those that have children, families with children. So this is like a public that is generally, in principle, is perceived as being most digitally skilled, or are better prepared for digitalization than our previous, like, traditional conventional users in the past. So this is just an example of how this change is taking place in Madrid. This is a map of Madrid in which you can see census tracts colored in 3 different tones. In green, you have the census tracts in which the most common beneficiary pre-COVID-19 contacting social services was someone aged above 65. So these were areas in town where the most frequent contact between social services and our beneficiaries took place among the elderly. In blue, you have lone parents, and in red, you have a couple, like 2 adults plus children. So it is clear that the most common pattern of contact between the beneficiaries and us was taking place among the elderly. And this is how the COVID-19 crisis changed the landscape. As you can see, families with children, younger users, took over the elderly, which withdrew from the social services for obvious reasons, but also because mostly they're very affected by the health crisis, but not so much by the social crisis in Spain, where the pension system is allowing them just to keep their level of household income. This is really a good opportunity for us, taking into consideration the fact that we have, like, new users, new people approaching us, people that are in need of our services, that are younger and probably more digitally skilled than in the past. But we know that technology is probably not the only thing we need to actually grant this digital transformation. Technology favors the changes, but it does not ensure them on its own. And what we really feel that we need to do, and this is one of the things we want to work on from now on, is fostering a cultural change that will allow technology to actually to make the best use of technology within our organization. So just a few figures for you to imagine how our local services are. So our workforce constitutes over more than 30,000 people working in 800 different locations in town. On average, these workers are around the age of 50, so they are not digital natives. But we are starting now in this very same month, last month, January 21, hiring 10,000 new positions for new workers who most likely will be digital natives. This is what we see on the side of our workforce, but then on the side of our clients, according to our data, we estimate that there is 1/3 of our clients or of the citizens approaching us that are willing to prioritize a truly digital contact with the social services. This is what our data shows. 31.2% of our users and potential users choose digital means to approach us, as opposed to 60.7% of our users who are choosing conventional methods to approach, meaning, face-to-face contact or eventually telephone calls. There's like 8% of those we are interviewing and trying to understand how they want to approach us that report systematically that they do not know. Of course, this is very unevenly distributed by profile of users and household types. The cluster of users that are more reluctant are, of course, reluctant to use the digital means are users above the age of 65. Only 13, but already 13.4%, if we put it in those terms, of them are digitally competent to contact us digitally. But then for the rest, we estimate that only 1/3 is willing to accept the internet and online means to really approach us. For the rest, people express a very consistent preference for conventional methods in approaching our social services. So in sum, we estimate that it is a good timing for proceeding and deepening into this kind of massive digitalization we are undertaking. And we expect that over the next 2 or 3 years, we will catch up with other areas in the city of Madrid who have been leading this race towards digitalization of public services. We have the internal readiness. We estimate that we will increasingly have it when this new workforce, these like younger workers will join our organization. We have the strongest political support these days. We have the access to funds, which of course is an important dimension and an important requirement for a successful digitalization. The EU is fostering actually us becoming digital, and we want to really maximize the opportunities that these funds are providing us. And we know that there is a shifting profile towards more digitally prepared users that are already approaching us. Younger people, more educated, asking us to have a more efficient and a cleaner contact, like more simple means for them to contact us and for us to provide them with the support that they require. This is like the good side of the story. However, we are already very aware that we need to expand the digital skills among that part of our workforce that are still not going to be renewed in the short term. So we will, however, we will we estimate consistently that we will have like 2/3 of our workforce that will not be digital natives, and we have to work out with them, as President Xu was suggesting, in the digital competencies, and also the fact that we still see 2/3 of our users that express a very consistent preference for contacting us through conventional methods. So this is all from my side, and from the side of Madrid. We are, of course, willing to participate throughout this exchange we are starting now in this with our presentations and the sessions that will come forth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Cebolla Boado. Now I give the floor to Professor Lynn Healey. She is a well-known scholar, author of several major books on social work issues. She is a board of trustees, a distinguished professor emerita from the University of Connecticut School of Social Work. She is the main representative of the International Association of Schools of Social Work at the UN. You have the floor, Professor Healey.
Thank you very much, Sergey, and good morning and good evening and good night to some of you around the world. We haven't quite figured out how to deal with this time zone issue yet. Some way of compressing time zones would be wonderful as we proceed with this. Excuse me. Well, as I think all of us listening, and excuse me a minute, it's winter here, it's very dry. I think, as many of you have pointed out, digital technologies offer amazing opportunities, but they also risk widening the gap for some of the most vulnerable populations. In fact, many of those whose lives might be particularly enhanced by these very technologies. And this was reflected in the Secretary General's report for this commission meeting, where he said that those most lacking digital resources are those most likely to benefit from them, including the elderly, women, and rural residents. Seems to be impossible to talk about any topic these days without relating it to our current status of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think the COVID pandemic has increased our awareness of the potential of technologies as well as some of the limitations. Reliance has certainly made it possible for people to meet some of their most basic needs during this time of being largely shut in from the physical world. It's allowed education, healthcare, some mental health connections, and the ability to meet your basic needs by ordering food, mobile banking, etc. It's also, however, revealed the challenges of ensuring equal access. In the field of education, it's allowed the delivery of synchronous as well as asynchronous classrooms, made it possible to more or less keep children in school even when schools were closed. It's allowed a lot of forms of adult education and enrichment. People who have good technology can now tour major museums online. They can link into wonderful webinars from around the world, attend lectures, etc. And I'm sure that some of these things will continue even when we're allowed to go in person. Telehealth existed before, but it's certainly been pressed forward during the pandemic, where many routine doctor's visits in the US at least were canceled in the months from March through June, but doctor visits continued to take place by telephone and by video conferencing. And in some cases, these have been augmented by at-home tools like blood pressure and oxygen meters. There's a lot of prospects, I think, in the future, and some of this is already being done, where telehealth will allow practitioners in very rural areas to access specialists with difficult cases to improve care. I found out a few years ago that the US Peace Corps, for example, used to reject applicants who had certain medical conditions like diabetes or serious food allergies. But with the advent of mobile phone technology and telehealth, they were able to accept these applicants. The challenges of inequalities, I'm going to, the Secretary General's report identified 4 issues: access, meaning primarily infrastructure and technology devices, cost and affordability, skill, and finally, relevance. For even high-income developed countries struggle with addressing these 4 items for those who are the most vulnerable. And it's proving challenging to reach those most likely to be left behind. I'm going to draw examples specifically from Hartford, Connecticut. The city right next to me is the capital city of one of the wealthiest states in the United States. Connecticut has a very high per capita income, but it also has some of the most economically unequal cities in the country. And Hartford is one of these, as are several other of our cities. Hartford's median household income is less than half of the state's overall rate. It has a very high poverty rate. At least a quarter live below our very inadequate and low poverty line, meaning many more actually are living in poverty. And the majority of the population, estimated at between 80 and 85%, are either African American or Latino, with the largest number being Latino, some of them being mainly Spanish-speaking households. Even before the pandemic, school performance of children in the Hartford system lagged significantly behind wealthier towns. When schools closed to in-person learning, these problems multiplied and the gap has widened. In fact, students in the cities are most likely to be learning online because those schools have tended to stay closed longer than the ones in the smaller and suburban communities. This has meant tremendous loss of education for many children. They picked 1 week in late September. Our school year usually commences in late August, where they were going to count how many children were not logging in. And about 1,000 children in Hartford didn't log in at all during that week. It was even worse when the pandemic began in a nearby city, the city of Waterbury, in the spring. Over the 3 months where education was largely online, about 1/3 of the children never logged in at all. They simply vanished from schooling. So obviously they have huge lacks. Each of the 4 factors that the Secretary General identified apply. In terms of access and infrastructure, many children had no devices. Some had a cell phone, but to do assignments for a full school day on a cell phone is largely impossible. And there might have been 1 cell phone in a household with parents and multiple children trying to do learning. Fewer had laptops. And even if they had a laptop, was there an internet connection available? Pre-pandemic, the usual solution has been to provide this service in local library branches and community centers, but all these were closed. As it turned out, probably providing laptops was the easiest part, although it was costly. But a combination of government funding and philanthropic donations did provide a large number of laptops to children that didn't have them. But laptops was a small part of the solution. Providing reliable internet was much more difficult to provide and is very costly even for wealthier residents. So there's been a struggle to try to provide this using sometimes things like mobile hotspots that would park in areas of particularly high need. I think skill is one of the more interesting ones, and we've learned that skill is needed. I think it was really highlighted perhaps during this pandemic, especially perhaps by the education sector. Skill is needed not only on the part of the user, which is usually our focus, like that the elderly don't know how. They're not skilled computer users, and therefore we have to teach people how to use the internet. But I think skill on the part of the provider and the designer is critical. The early efforts here in delivering online education were absolutely dreadful. They were frustrating, they were child unfriendly, and it's no surprise that even children who might have initially tuned in might try not to tune in. It required children, even very young children in kindergarten, to click on a succession of websites using a different password for each one with written instructions and do learning exercises, then proceed to click on another one, so on all day. As my granddaughter, who was 5 at the time, said, I only like school in school. It was very much poor design for children. Educators in some areas have improved vastly, but this has required a large investment in training. But there has been a lot of improvement, and much more of the education online in some systems is being done where the teacher is live and is actually connected, and there's some communication among the class. So this has been, certainly there's been a great deal of accelerated learning on the part of providers and designers. We have similar design problems in other areas. Our state has set up a computerized system for scheduling vaccine appointments for the COVID vaccine. And almost all users report that the system is so clumsy, so complex, that it's very difficult, even with users who have skills, to actually make an appointment. And it's had to be supplemented by call-in systems. Relevance and awareness, these problems certainly have been magnified for non-English speakers. And some of the content, especially in the earlier model, probably lacked cultural relevance for the users. I think there's a 5th thing in the education sector that was not specifically identified by the Secretary General, and that is support. Lack of support has been a problem in many households as they simply do not have a parent available full-time to sit beside a child and help with this learning. Especially this was true in the earlier model I talked about, where children who had not yet learned to read were having to navigate websites with written instructions. I was interested in the example from Madrid where the map showed that the lone parent households looked as if they were really concentrated in certain segments of the Madrid area. And this is true in Hartford and many other cities as well, where you have a concentration of families that are likely to have multiple social needs and perhaps be less likely to be available because of their own work demands. And in some cases, their inability to perhaps read English and therefore help their children with the learning. I'm not going to go into detail on, there's lots of other issues around confidentiality, informed consent, the need for new regulations and modifications. And this is all things that are going to have to be focused on if we're going to expand not only education, but certainly health and mental health services. But now, well into the pandemic, we have a much keener awareness of the potential and the challenges. We can build on this to increase our knowledge of telehealth delivery. I think that this increased skill in designing online education and realizing we can do this means that children with severe disabilities and severe illnesses can continue to go to school while they're rehabilitating with their classmates. Obviously, families can continue to connect across the miles, and perhaps will even improve the environment as people have to commute less if they can work part-time from home. As with other technologies, poorer countries will benefit from the leapfrogging in that learning from other places can be adapted. So in conclusion, I would say that as we press ahead with the Sustainable Development Goals, that we should look again at Goal 10, which is to reduce inequality within and between countries. And there's currently no targets there about information and use of technology. These appear elsewhere in the goals, but I think as part of reducing inequality, the access to digital technologies needs to be acknowledged and underscored not only in the infrastructure goal, which is where it sits now, but also looked at in the context of inequality. So thank you, and hope I didn't take more than my 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Lynn. And before giving the floor to the next speaker, I would like to ask the participants, and we do have some participants from around the world, to submit their questions in writing. It would facilitate the moderator to summarize the questions at the end, and it would facilitate the response of the participants. And now I give the floor to Professor Dries Girawi, who is the head of the competition council in his country. And he is also president of the ICSW MENA region, and he is a professor at the University in Rabat. You have the floor, sir. Vous avez la parole, Dries.
Dries, you have to mute, please.
Thank you very much, my estimate friend Sergey, for your kind presentation. I am very happy, and it's a great honor for me to contribute in this important side event. I will talk about the digital right as a new challenge for social development. The acute global health crisis triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic has indistinctly affected every continent since January 2012 and cast an universe glass at the state of the world, imbued with a generalizing conviction that human society have entered a new era marked by uncertainties, hazards, and major risk of all trips. These risks have affected all aspects of daily social life of the entire population living in the north and the south, to threatening global human safety as a whole. These crises revealed that the global system is undergoing the emergence of a new generation of insecurities and wars, manifested noticeably in war of food, water, energy, drugs, and plant and animal genetic engineering. They also take the most devastating and pernicious forms that are associated with biological warfare on the one hand, and with wars related to knowledge, learning, artificial intelligence, information, image, space, and of course, digital technology. Furthermore, the lack of coordinated, shared, responsive, and united global governance to manage the above-mentioned pandemic illustrate the exorbitant cost of these crises, with caused socio-economic, human, and psychological repercussions on the world poor class, vulnerable wage earners and workers, and small business project leaders working in the so-called informal sector. These activities carried out in this sector constitute the main source of income for these leaders, especially for women, young people, and abandoned children in rural and suburban areas in particular. In fact, it's not only concerned with a crisis in the system as a whole, but rather with a real disaster that affected the economic, social, and political system. In addition, the emergence of new generation of poverty, unemployment, precariousness, social violence, diseases, and migration are just noticeable forms caused by the spirit of the COVID-19 pandemic. Addressing such crises, therefore, doesn't require classical reform, but rather substantial changes and essential innovation to guarantee the efficient running of the system as a whole. Socially speaking, implementing these changes and innovations requires adopting a new social development model, which focuses on two core values and a new generation of human rights, referred to as digital rights. What's the core value of a new social development model? The fact that 2020 global pandemic is leaving behind human distress, despair, and misery is a way that calls to maintain or even exceed the 1929 Great Depression in the reason why the development of the post-COVID-19 new social development model must center around two core values: dignity and the value of human beings. Hence, future public policy makers and the United Nations International and Regional Agency must take into account these two values when designing social action and solidarity programs. Dignity refers to a state of a human being measured by the satisfaction of all population basic needs in a given society, based on effective access to fundamental human rights and without discrimination because of sex, age, social status, place of residence, and physical and social health condition. Effective access to fundamental rights includes the right of education and training, the right of health, an universal basic income and decent employment, right to food and decent housing, right to returning basic health care, family and old age benefits, the right of disability support and economic equal opportunities and treatment, the right of fair justice and freedom of expression and worship, the right of geographic mobility and participating to city management, and the right of safely culture in treatment and living in a healthy and eco-friendly environment. Dignity also means the respect of rights of social basic services, whether concerned with drinkable water, electricity, sanitation, or means of transport. Put in it differently, dignity is a global and general state of human condition in a given society at a given moment in history. It denotes, in fine, the highest and fullest form of citizenship. As far as the value of human beings within society is concerned, it depends on the implementation of these simultaneous actions, including recognition, consideration, and involvement in decision-making and city management. In this context, participative democracy merits skills, accountability, equity, justice, and equality, as well social, cultural, and professional inclusion constitute the basic parameters in this value. Translating these two core values into social development plans requires the adoption of a new model whose founding principle encompass extended universal social protection basis, establishing a basic and universal income for all, adopting new methods to tackle poverty and unemployment, restructuring social solidarity funding and governance system, and changing radically the current mainstream that governs social dialogue. This principle can't, however, be carried out unless the state, civil society organization, businesses, territorial authorities, and international and regional organizations take into account the new realities driven by the digital revolution and their impact on sustainable and inclusive human development. The digital right as a new generation of human right. The digital revolution is generating new form of gap and injustice caused by the emergence and the development of a growing phenomenon within society, and which can be described as a digital illiteracy. The latter is best demonstrated in the wide-reaching inequalities in terms of using information and communication technology in various regions of the world. For example, in 2028, the proportion of population using internet in sub-Saharan African is 25%. In South Asia, 30%. In East Asia and the Pacific, 45%. And in the member of OECD, 23%. And in Europe, 84%, and in North America, 88%. The most direct consequence of these digital inequalities include increases difficulties experienced by the world's poor population in accessing basic social service. The fact that everything evolving within the economic and society of the 21st century is the reason why dignity and the value of human beings, as defined before, currently depends on every citizen's ability to absorb the tools of digital revolution at all aspects of economic, social, and cultural life. In fact, the tools and mechanisms for access to education, in employment, health, housing, family benefits, several pay, different social benefit, or microfinance credit has currently been transformed into distance learning, teleworking, e-filing, and e-payment. All these digital devices require a digitized registration in digitized local, regional, and national registers, from which the poor could be excluded, who not only belong to the new generation of illiteracy people, but also lack the condition for a fair and controlled use of these devices. Therefore, extending digital technology has become a real and necessary step and a sine qua non for any policy that seeks to enable the poor to benefit for better access to the basic needs and services. Moreover, the nation state, regional and international organization specialized in social action and solidarity must endeavor to elevate the digital right as a new generation of human right and transform it into a basic human right. Helping the poor and vulnerable populations master digital technology should also be a major focus area for their new social development strategy. What suggestion for a better future in accordingly to generate this new generation of human right, digital right? Given the aforementioned challenge, the international community must develop and adopt a global plan to build the digital capacities of poor populations. This plan, which focuses on the following major areas, must be carried out in the turn with the United Nations 2030 agenda. First, undertaking a global international program for education and training in terms of new good digital practices, with aims at strengthening the poor's capacities in priority areas and enlarging their access to basic social services to facilitate their socio-economic, socio-cultural, and socio-institutional integration. Second, promoting the development of digital infrastructures by supporting the formulation and implementation for national programs that seek to reduce the digital divide worldwide and target vulnerable, disadvantaged, and outlying zones in rural area, mountainous, and desert Saharan region. Third, facilitating the poor's access to internet via innovative financial support and mechanisms for the purchase of digital tools. Four, increasing connectivity in a way that reduces the digital divide worldwide in vulnerable, disadvantaged, and outlying zone in rural area, mountainous, and desert and Sahara region. 5, enhancing public, private, civil society partnership that aim to update and familiarize the poor and the vulnerable population with innovative projects pertaining to digital economic jobs, especially in the sector specialized in social and solidarity-based economy. 6, organizing under the auspice of UNDP, the UNESCO, and ICSW, an information and awareness raising campaigns on digital technology goods practices in the 9 regions of ICSW in order to enhance social development for the benefit of the poor and the vulnerable populations living in these 9 regions. Finally, for my country, I will recommend that this agenda will be integrated in the new program of the National Initiative for Human Development headed by His Majesty the King Mohammed VI since 2005 as a new strategy of fighting against poverty. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Professor Gerawi, for your very important statement and for your suggestions. Now, I would like to give the floor to Professor Antonio Lopez Pilates. He is the full professor of social work and social services at the National University of Distance Education in Madrid, Spain. He is also executive director of ICSW, and he is a founding member of International Network for Social Policy Research and Teaching and the International Association of Doctors of Alternative Conflict Resolution Methods. You have the floor, Antonio, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank President Dr. Su and Dr. Sergei Selenev for the kind invitation to participate in this side event. And it's an honor for me to have been invited and to share with you my thoughts and my research. No? I think that as a leading organization in the field of social welfare for the past 90 years, the International Council of Social Welfare has always collaborated in building a society of rights and rights for all of us and from all walks of life. In the third decade of the 21st century, International Council of Social Welfare continues throughout collective efforts to be an effective tool to put social welfare back on the public agenda, including the digital challenge. As the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted, we are safe by science, based on cooperation and technical competence. And we are safe by our collective ability to bond, to recognize, to respect, and to pursue common goals. And in this sense, I hope that the special link between International Council of Social Welfare and the United Nations will continue to strengthen in the coming years. Participating in these side events is a privilege, and as an organization, it is a magnificent opportunity to put social welfare concerns on the public agenda. The COVID-19 pandemic has forced us all to change our priorities. In a global organization, such as the International Council of Social Welfare, digitalization offers us an opportunity to work as a team, to disseminate our proposals, and to improve the services we provide to our members and to the entire global society. Skimming over the daily debates on the pandemic, I would like to turn the gaze to a key phenomenon that has been accelerated by the COVID-19 crisis. All of you are talking about it, the digitalization of our societies, and also one of its effects, the need to design inclusive social policies in a digital environment. Without digitalization, there cannot be inclusion. And the digitalization model we are implementing now in our welfare system at the City of Madrid will have lasting consequences. Digitalization represents a collective global challenge that will redefine the relationship between users, professionals, and the administration or companies that provide welfare services. The importance of this issue has led the United Nations Commission for Social Development to organize this 59th session around the theme socially just transitions towards sustainable development, the role of digital technologies on social development and well-being of all. As in the past 90 years, all of us at the International Council of Social Welfare need to bring our perspective to the social welfare debate. In the field of digital inclusion, some key issues are as follows from my point of view. Firstly, the protection of citizen rights, which are increasingly being decided in the digital sphere. Our institutions are becoming digitalized, and more services and benefits have a digital gateway. Therefore, the digital skills of professionals working in the field of social welfare and of citizens are essential, including social workers. The digital divide is not only about access. It also entails a gap of use, of skills, of life trajectories. Secondly, the services we provide. Our users are citizens, although in many places across the world, like Madrid, we are confined. How can we develop new ways of interviewing them, visiting homes, making diagnoses, and interviewing using new technologies and the internet? How can we turn digitalization into an opportunity to improve citizens' care, the public administration, the welfare state, and social services? Thirdly, digital rights. Digital intervention and digital skills have to form part of the curricula in our universities. We have to be trained to intervene in an environment with its own particular characteristics. We are not going to lay aside face-to-face communication, you know that. But it is true that the digital world requires specific training in digital skills. And what we are doing every day are machines. And we have to work in this sense with all the new technologies to improve our welfare system. Fourthly, the need to value the scientific and expert knowledge of scientists, including social scientists, and of course, social workers. In a context marked by the existence of a populist wave, radicalization, fake news, and the questioning of scientists and experts, it is necessary to emphasize the importance of the right to rigorous information, to a professional evaluation based on expert knowledge and science, including social sciences. To achieve an inclusive democracy, we need to address technological change as priority in our social welfare strategy. And we need to work in interdisciplinary teams to design the best social services for the 21st century. The future is not written in stone. We are building it as we speak, as we do. And the decisions we make about our technological model will shape our immediate future. Technology is not neutral, our social services are not neutral, and our digital social services will be not neutral. It is essential that the public agenda include a debate about an inclusive digital model, since without digital inclusion, there is no social inclusion. And I would like to end my brief intervention with this sentence. Without inclusive digitalization, we cannot achieve an inclusive democracy. Thank you very much for listening to me. Take care, stay healthy, and hope to see you next time in Madrid or in New York. Bye.
Thank you very much, Antonio, for your important statement. Thank you. And now I'm very pleased to give a floor to Professor Shahjahan, a professor of social work and dean of academic affairs at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai, India. Professor Shahjahan held several leadership positions at his university before. He is currently the vice president of our organization, International Council on Social Welfare, and he represents ICSW at the Task Force on Global Agenda for Social Work and Social Development. I would like to add that Professor Shah Jahan is, together with colleagues from Europe, America, and Africa, founded two global academic alliances, Critical Urge Alliance and Solidarity Economy, Reciprocity, and Social Innovation. He is currently leading several international collaborative scientific projects with his university. You are welcome, Professor Shah Jahan, please.
Thank you, Sergey, for that generous introduction. And it's a privilege to present my views in this side event on Commission on Social Development 59 session. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a mere coincidence that this side event of the Commission on Social Development, which was planned much before the COVID-19 crisis, on a theme, socially just transition towards sustainable development, role of digital technologies in social development and well-being for all. This is held at a time when digital technologies have boomed for various reasons of connecting with people across the globe in different ways when we were disconnected in many ways in a physical sense. So it's a known fact that the technologies have transformed the way we live and the way we actually, development is being seen globally. Many efforts of using information communication technology for facilitating development have proven huge results in reducing the development gap existing among regions and communities in many parts of the world. However, there is a growing literature, emphasizing that the importance of digital inclusion, which is a topic of our discussion today, in addressing or overcoming poverty and injustice. This was furthered by the Millennium Development Goals, where one of the goal was focused on making new technology, especially information communication technology, accessible for all. Well, there are two opposing camps, those that consider ICT to be a panacea for poverty reduction, and those that claim that ICT has no reasonable role in poverty reduction as long as the basic needs are not met for the people living in abject poverty and exclusion. However, there is a growing, a broader consensus that the technology-enabled development process has greater potential for efficiency and reach, thereby facilitating a faster pace of development. It is in this context we are talking about this topic on social inclusion through digital inclusion. Through my presentation, I would like to explore the process of digital inclusion, breaking the nexus of poverty and development. If you look at the Sustainable Development Goals Report 2020, which emphasize that even before COVID-19 pandemic, the baseline projections suggested that 6% of the global population will still be living in extreme poverty in 2030. This is way below the goal of ending poverty by end of 2030. Assuming that the pandemic remains at the level, the poverty rate is projected to reach 8.8% in 2020, which is far above the rate which we projected, not keeping in consideration of the COVID pandemic, which came in later. So this kind of diversion from the poverty projections declining to 7.7 and 7.4% in 2020 and 2021, and now currently projected to be 8.8 and 8.7, gradually declining by 2021 when we recover from the impact of the COVID-19 crisis. This is the first time we are probably moving beyond the 2017 level. An estimated 71 million additional people will be living in extreme poverty due to COVID-19. South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa will be having a largest share of this poor who are going to be pushed to the poverty due to the COVID-19 crisis, with an additional 32 million and 26 million respectively for these two regions. We are also facing a huge crisis of 690 million people undernourished in 2019, and 750 million run out of food during this period. And 39 to 63% of the global population will only be covered under the essential healthcare, way too far from the global universal health coverage goal, which we have envisaged in the Sustainable Development Goals. There is also severe shortage of doctors and medical staff, mostly in the less developed countries, where the one physician per 1,000 of population way below what is expected to be a reasonable medical healthcare facilities and personnel available for this. What we are seeing this from all these things is that the traditional approaches of poverty reduction and addressing developmental challenges of particularly dealing with the complex issues of poverty, inequality, and marginalization need a completely different approach and procedures and strategies for dealing with this. The world is definitely urgently in need of a fresh approach. Exploring the potential to catalyze social economic change in rural villages through digital transformation in ways that benefit the poorest and the most marginalized communities has become critical imperative. One of the question of Janet Erasi was asking that how do we ensure in a growing interconnected world where people living in extreme poverty can access anti-poverty programs or social protection programs. This is going to be a huge challenge. It is in this context we need to look at the European Parliament, the report on digitization for development, D4D report, which is talking about reducing poverty through technology, which talks about several interesting strategies and mainstreaming digital technologies in the European Union, development and focusing on the development policies contributing to achievement of sustainable development through SDG-centered digitalization process. At the same time, if you read the report, it also deplores the persistent digital divide existing within each country relating to gender, geography, age, income, ethnicity, health condition, or disability. These are serious factors of discrimination and exclusion which are currently existing. The question is whether digitalization process further excludes those people who are already excluded through these processes. But we need processes which will include these communities which are currently excluded from development process. So the report actually summarizes the aspirations as well as pitfalls of digitalization of development in development policy, achievement of SDGs, as well as people respectively living below the international poverty line as a result of the pandemic. I was looking at one of the report of digital reach in India by the National Sample Survey Organization, which talks about the digital reach far below any level of expectation, where households with computers in rural areas is just 4.4%. In urban areas, it is 23.4%. All India level, it is just 10.7%. And further, if you look at the households with internet facility, whether through mobile internet or cable internet connections, the rural areas having only 14.9% and urban areas having 23.4%. This again tells a lot about the kind of reach of digitalization process for development, which can completely take away a large section of people from the reach of these programs. And the report further talks about how many people, how much percentage of people can actually operate computer in rural and urban areas, as you can see on the screen. This essentially tells us about whatever digitalization process which we are going to have in the development sector. It is going to take away a large number of people in rural areas and people who are in or resource deprived communities are going to be severely affected by this process of digitalization. While making the argument made above where the technology-enabled process for accelerating development is expected to bring desirable outcomes, the reach and access of such information communication technology is definitely a prerequisite, is what we could see from this data which I'm presenting before you. Some examples of these processes which I could highlight here is one I've mentioned about the digitalization of development, the European Parliament consideration of the report. And the second one which I could highlight is the Smart Africa Alliance program. And finally, from my own country, the Digital India program. The digitization for development is actually enlisting a lot of policy initiatives which particularly emphasize the response and the responsibility of the European Union and to support the less developed countries in enhancing digitalization process and making it reach the poor and the most vulnerable communities around the globe. Looking at this African Alliance, it's a very interesting, innovative idea of Smart Africa, Alliance, which talks about how ICTs can create villages with, the last mile connectivity to internet and technologies, which has been initiated by, 7 African heads of the state. And now currently the Alliance has 30 member countries. There are several interesting rural connectivity programs which the Alliance have formed and which has brought several of the development programs to the reach of the poor and the marginalized communities in African region. Talking about the Digital India program, which is an initiative by the government of India from 2015 onwards. It lies on 3 major pillars. One is called the accounts for the poor. It is called Jan Dhan accounts. These accounts are no-frill bank accounts opened in the name of the poor, who could operate this bank account where the social welfare benefits can be directly transferred to their accounts without having any leakage of the money which is being allocated for social welfare and social protection programs. And how this is being enabled? This is enabled through a unique ID, which is called Aadhaar, unique ID for every citizen, which we never had in the past. This ID will be the key for entering into any social welfare programs which are going to be implemented by the government of India, where the programs will be linked to this unique ID of every beneficiary. And essentially this will be connected through the mobile applications where the OTP enabled services will be applied where this will be linked to the Aadhaar or the unique ID, and the same is linked to their account where the money directly reaches. In one of the earlier comment about the development resources reaching the poor, we have analyzed that only 15% of the fund allocated for poverty programs reaches actually the poor. So this initiative of Digital India program is essentially to remove all such leakages in the entire process, which is supposed to be reaching the poor, so that the developmental programs and the developmental assistance is reaching the desired beneficiaries. So this way of digitalization aimed to change how do we look at public services public services from a welfare approach to an entitlement. When you have an Aadhaar enabled or unique ID enabled bank account, which is linked to your mobile connections, and where this becomes an entitlement where the beneficiaries, the intended beneficiaries, do not have to apply for the program. Rather, the beneficiaries will be identified by the state mechanisms through the enlistment of people below poverty line and linking them with the unique ID and the accounts and connecting it to their mobile applications so that the money reaches them as an entitlement, or the assistance reaches them as an entitlement, not as a welfare program. When we consider this, one of the very, very critical issue which we need to look at is the gender gap. Gender gap, mainly because of there is a huge gender gap in mobile internet use. This report talks about a huge number of people, particularly in South Asia, as well as in sub-Saharan Africa. If you could look at from the table, from the exhibit, that 51% of the people, that's the gender gap which exists. 51% is the difference between the male and the female mobile internet usage links in South Asia, particularly in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. If you look at sub-Saharan Africa, much better, but still 37% is the difference between the male usage and the women usage of the internet access. So this is going to be putting what is so-called the feminization of poverty into another level, where much of the welfare services are going to be routed through this digitalization process. Women are going to be further excluded from the entire process of welfare delivery and social protection programs. So this such usage of gender gap, particularly for the mobile internet usage, is mostly due to 4 different factors. For ownership, there is affordability, whether women can afford to buy a mobile application, a smartphone, whether they have the necessary digital literacy and the skills. And there is also concerns about safety and security of usage of internet and the mobile. And particularly in a South Asian context, quite often the patriarchal systems do not allow women to own a mobile device. And on the other side, using of mobile internet, the same issue of literacy and skills and affordability and safety and security. And fourthly, the relevance of such mobile internet usage, particularly for accessing services, where the services itself has not been digitized to a great extent. So these are critical concerns. The reason why I wanted to highlight the gender gap in the entire digitization process is to highlight the fact that while considering rural and other disadvantaged groups, women are at a greater disadvantage of accessing services through digitalization process. At the end, I would like to conclude that the way forward for ensuring that the digitalization of welfare and the services need to have major 3 axes for interventions. One is the last mile digital infrastructure provisioning. This needs to be made available in the rural areas and in the most unreached areas of hinterlands of various countries, particularly in the less developed countries, where the role of the state comes in a very, very, very it's a very, very important role the state will be playing. And also the corporates have a huge role to play in this. So it's actually a public-private partnership which will ensure that the last mile digital infrastructure connectivity is ensured, and the responsibility lies with the state in ensuring this collaboration works in the benefit of the people. And the second very, very important aspect is the political will and the leadership. It is necessary to have a very strong political determination and the leadership to make sure that such digitization process remove all existing divides which exist on the base of gender, class, and other social dimensions, which make it difficult for certain sections to access digital infrastructure and digital services. And finally, a whole of government approach or a single window system for people to access the services is going to be very, very important. This is an approach which is being used by the Smart African Alliance, which talks about bringing different departments and the sections within the government to have a coordinated effort in addressing poverty and delivering services to the people who are deprived of such services through other means. So this, I would emphasize that organizations like ICSW and ICSW and all international organizations have a great role to promote such digitalization process and ensuring that the digitalization process does not include any exclude any further communities, and the international organizations like ICSW must remain as a watchdog in ensuring digital inclusion reaches everybody who are excluded from the current developmental processes. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity and listening to my ideas. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Shahjahan, for your statement. Now we have some time for discussion. I would appreciate if we get the questions and the panelists would address these questions. If we could spend some 10 minutes on Q&A, it would be highly appreciated. I'm wondering where the questions, how can we ensure that people living in extreme poverty who can't afford the internet connections and computer can be included in digitalized social protection systems rather than marginalized even further? This is the question which I guess should be addressed to all the participants. The other question is, I was interested to hear about how new models and programs must take into consideration the core values of dignity and human well-being when being devised. In addition to that which we share in common, our human dignity, how can we ensure that these systems reflect a diversity of perspectives? Thank you. I wonder if some of the panelists would be willing to proceed with these questions.
Sergey, may I continue with, I mentioned about this particular question about—
Yes, extreme poverty.
The question about how do people living in extreme poverty can access services when they do not have the means to have the technology and resources to access this. One of the interesting initiatives in India, which have been done by several non-governmental organizations, is to establish internet kiosks, internet cafes in villages, which are managed by the village community. So that's a place where actually the villagers could go and access these services without having to invest on private technological solutions for accessing the services. So such processes where the state facilitated or civil society initiated mechanisms to make technology reach the communities, the rural communities, will be very, very important dimension. And secondly, the point I mentioned while I was making my presentation as well, that it is a state's responsibility to ensure that the last mile digital infrastructure is made available to the people. And it's not necessary that the state invest all of it, but the state, in collaboration with the private sector, including the business house and the other corporate bodies, to establish such digital infrastructure networks in tribal and rural areas and the resource deprived communities. So such processes of public-private partnership and such common facilities in areas could, to some extent, address this issue of digital divide. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, Monsieur Driss Guiraoui, vous avez la parole. Driss, est-ce que c'est possible?
Mute.
Unmute.
Thank you, Sergey. I think if we want to appreciate the important consequence of the post-COVID crisis related to dignity, we have to be sure that we assisted on a development of a real new generation of poor and poorness, of employment and employees, and vulnerability and vulnerables. So if we want to make an important part of our population now, not only poor, but the new poor part of our population around the world, not only in Africa or in the development country, around the world. We need to have effectively dignity as the key of the new social strategy for the future. So this precision or this conviction makes the universal basic income or the income for all as an essential objective for the future, not only in the International United Nations Commission of Human Rights, but in the national public policy, fighting against poverty and literacy and all social inequality. That's the first. That means that we need to have a new category of responsibility. Now we have the social responsibility of enterprise and state and territories, the environmental responsibility and economic responsibility. But what we need now to add a new kind of responsibility, existential, because the human condition is destabilized. That's why we need to have another universal kind of responsibility. We can call it dignity responsibility or human responsibility, because the nature of the crisis is a very systemic crisis and global crisis. That's why the discussion, the international discussion about universal basic income is a real discussion and serious discussion. And all what we see around the world post-COVID demonstrates that this is the right way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Driss. And now, Antonio, please.
Okay, I don't have a clear answer, but I have a worry that I want to share with you. No, I think that related to the core values and democracy, I think that we are constantly incorporating technology into the social, private, and public welfare domains. No? But do we have the capacity to certify that these systems are not biased? That the information, classification, and management system we will be using will not produce negative effects? For me, the response to the second question related to the core value of the human beings is that, from my point of view, creating a public or private institution that can guarantee that the system we use are not biased is an absolute necessity for the survival of our inclusive democracies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other responses from the panelists to the questions we received? If I may add to the question regarding how the very poor people can access the digital technologies, particularly regarding social protection, this is, of course, a very difficult question, a very difficult challenge. I believe that Professor Shah Jahan already provided several good points on that. I would like to add from the personal side that here, what might be important is intergenerational solidarity. What I mean is sometimes the people in the same household could help each other to get access to important digital technologies. For example, younger people could facilitate access of older people or just to inform them, because pooling of the resources in the families can facilitate this social inclusion. All right, and now, since we do not have any other questions, I would like maybe to wrap up the discussion because we're already far beyond the limits which we were given. First of all, I would like to say that what transpired from most statements is digital technologies is a crucial tool of empowerment. And it's a crucial tool of empowerment for people with disabilities, for older people, for younger people, for many vulnerable groups. In this sense, it has enormous opportunities to use it now, and it has even more substantial potential to use in the future. Of course, it is closely connected to the issue of poverty eradication, because without income, without access to connectivity, it is difficult to hope that some sort of advances on a social scale can happen. So this digital technologies clearly expand choices, opportunities, and this is very important. It's the second point which I would like to make is that the issue of human rights is very important here, because there is a possibility of a new digital gap and new digital divide. Many people, many panelists spoke about this challenge and the need to avoid it. But here, what I would mention is the need for integrated policies. This is what Professor Shah Jahan said as a whole of government approach, because the need for integrated policies to prevent the digital gaps from emerging and to facilitate digital reach. This integrated set of policies is very important on many social issues, like, for example, social protection issue, but it is equally important in the digital field. And thank you for your questions and your statements. I really enjoyed all your statements. Now, I would like to give the floor to Antonio Lopez Pilates if he wishes to make a few concluding remarks. Antonio.
Okay, well, I only, what can I say? Only that I'm very happy to stay here. I'm very happy with our colleague, Lynn, from the International Association of School of Social Work. We are working together as always, and we'll do the same in the future. And I think that to put on the table this kind of problems is part of our identity as International Council of Social Welfare. And in this sense, I think that we are again putting all our resources and efforts to work together for the common good. This is the mission of our institution. Thank you very much for all the speakers and all the people that are watching this kind of program. And next time we hope to do the same online, but at the same time in New York. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all participants all around the world who came here at very difficult times sometimes. And I would like to say muchas gracias, merci, спасибо, thank you to all of you. And it was really a pleasure to have these side events. And please stay safe and be well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Take
Thank
care.
you, Sergey. Thank you all. Thank you, President.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank
See
you, my friends.
Yeah.
Shahjahan.
Yes, thank you.
Hello, Shahjahan.
And
Nice to
thank
see
you for our support team, Ines and Rafael. Thank you very much.
Yes, you had to work
Okay.
hard.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
It's really a pleasure working with you guys, and thanks for the support.
Okay, bye.
Take care.